everybody. Thanks for joining us today. It's been a really great week, and I've been out in the city meeting with a lot of you, and we've had some amazing interactions. So now's the opportunity just to touch base going into the weekend, to go through some of the thoughts, because thoughts are seeds. And if we can cultivate those seeds by watering them with our attention, becoming more focused on what our goals are and so forth, we can actually make improvement from the inside and have a much more clear idea about where we're going and how to get there. So thanks for joining us from Facebook and also on the webinar through Zoom. And great to have you all here. I just have a few thoughts for this morning, and then I'd like to hear any of the lingering thoughts or questions that any of you might have after the week, or from anything that you've heard so far that you want to discuss, questions to open up the conversation further, or any realizations you've had from the practice or hearing. And a few thoughts from this morning. Oftentimes in the world where we see so much variety and we see so many differences in people, it's hard to understand what the commonality is. It's the tendency to find commonality, at least among high-minded people. Those who founded this country, United States, had an idea that everybody was created equal. But in what way are they equal physically? It's hard to find any one person that's the same as another physically. So they must be talking about a metaphysical principle, which is valid. That is, the idea that there is commonality comes from a different level. And that is consciousness. On the level of consciousness, we're the same. We have similar quality and emanate from the exact same source. So the idea of consciousness and consciousness itself in Sanskrit is called Chaitanya. And without that, nothing exists. Matter factually doesn't matter unless there's consciousness nearby to observe it, because it's observable, but it can't observe, but we can. That's the difference between us. And then why are there so many differences in the world? Because we're the same on one level, but on the other hand, every day there's disagreements. And there's always a dichotomy practically in every field. No matter how seemingly simple it is, it always divides, and people have a different way of looking at it because of the way we've developed our consciousness. The consciousness is being expressed through a body, because right now we're in a body and it's conditioned by three modes of material nature, and therefore it creates a lens. And according to the quality of the lens through which we see the world, then we may perceive things, or we will perceive things differently. This is brought up in the Bhagavad Gita by Krishna in the 17th chapter, where he says that originally we have a pure consciousness, but it gets covered by various modalities of the lower nature of the material world, and that constitutes the material body, psychological body, which is a subtle body. And when we see through that lens, we're going to observe the world differently and react to things in different ways. So the wise person in the Bhagavad Gita is defined, and the word is Pandit, as somebody who actually is able to be trenchant and see beyond just the body. The body externally may look like a man, a woman, a cat, a dog, an ant, but a wise person is someone who actually sees the common spiritual nature behind every living being, the Chaitanya, or the consciousness that's there. And as I've mentioned many times, a principle that is common throughout the ancient yogic wisdom is that we are a combination of two energies. Actually, we're called Atma, or soul. just as the sun emanates unlimited photons of light. So similarly, we have an original divine source, and we are a tiny particle of consciousness emanating from that source. But when we're involved, also mixed up with the material energy, which is a lower energy than ourselves, and we're embodied, then we assume two identities. Actually, I'm concentrated mostly on my identity as being a man, a woman, a cat, or a dog. And I cater to that. However, the substantial and actually persisting nature that I am is beyond that. It's spiritual. And therefore, the lower energy and the higher energy is in my purview right now. But I am the one who's observing the body. I am not the body. And therefore, another definition of a person who's wise, who has knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita, is someone who knows the difference between the body and him or herself. And that's called the Kshetra, the Kshetragya. Kshetra means the field. And interestingly, the body is called the field, like a field of activities. But the Kshetragya, Gya means to, it's cognate with the word in English, know. It means that somebody knows the body. It means you're objectively looking and saying, oh, I'm in a body. I'm not the body. And somebody who knows the difference between the two is known to be a learned person. This is knowledge, actually. Real knowledge isn't just technological knowledge, which how to make something, how to build something, but it's actually to know the difference between the body and the self. This foundational knowledge is important because unless I have a clear idea who I am, I can't be aligned properly. And all harmony, all happiness comes through proper alignment. The word yoga comes from the word yuj, which really means to align or to connect with our original nature. So this is foundational. If I make a mistake on a mathematical problem, I say 2 + 2 = 5, and then I continue with more advanced calculations, and I get all the way to the end. The calculation, even if I use advanced calculus, because I made a mistake at 2 + 2, the end result is going to be different or wrong. So in a similar way, if I make the mistake that I am my body and don't see actually my essence, that I am the consciousness that's animating the body, but I'm not the body, then no matter how much I develop externally, I won't come out with a satisfactory solution to life's problems. So simply stated, real wisdom means to know that I'm not the body, and also to see the commonality in every living being. And so a wise person doesn't hate anyone, but actually sees that the external body and circumstances that person is in now is due to his or her previous interactions with karma and the three modes of material nature. But internally, the living entities or the conscious beings are the same. We're all connected on a spiritual level. Those are a few thoughts I had to share this morning. And now let's test out our technology here.
Yeah.
And now we have an opportunity, and please check in with reflections are easy. All you have to do to participate is take yourself off mute and say anything that you heard that stuck in your mind, or anything from previous talks if you've been attending them at any of the corporates. If you have a question that's a follow-up to anything, you can bring that out too.
Yeah, so we do, this is JP here. So we do have 8 people who have joined, including Manu, Rakesh, Rashmi, Stephen, and Justina.
Fantastic. Great to see you all. Thank you for joining. Been a great week. Yes, go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I said glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I was so happy to see your name there. Oh, it was such a heartfelt, wonderful meeting with your team.
Oh, they really appreciate it, as a matter of fact. they were wanting you back every quarter, and they said, can we have him come monthly? And we said, well, he actually already does presentations monthly. So just refer to, we all loved it very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm really touched by that. And I felt a really powerful energy with that. It was amazing.
Harekrishna.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, you gave the presentation yesterday at Intel.
Yes.
And just wanted to say thank you for the amazing presentation. Really appreciate it.
Well, you'll have to, after saying that, you'll have to give at least one detail. Because in the end, only details stimulate the mind. So let's hear one thing that you remember. If you need a moment to collect your thoughts, let me know. One thing we did talk about at Intel yesterday was the way in which consciousness expands or contracts. And the words in Sanskrit for happiness and distress are sukha and dukkha. So it's a dual word. Su means good and ka means space or consciousness. Not consciousness, but space. So du means bad. And so dukkha means a bad space or contracted space, and sukha means expanded. So there are ways that the consciousness expands by doing dharma or aligning yourself with right activity, like telling the truth. That's not so easy, maybe, but actually the reward is unlimited practically when one tells the truth. There's a kind of natural alignment. And also we talked about how certain vibrations resonate with the higher consciousness, and it expands the consciousness permanently as one practices. And when one has an expansive consciousness, then one can accommodate all kinds of complexities and can process them because one has the space to do it within. Yes, what else? Well, while you're thinking, I have a question that somebody just wrote in. This is from Katie, who said, I heard you speak about achieving higher energy states, HES. What is HES and how do you achieve it? I borrowed that terminology from an article that I read about research on acoustic resonance. And I found an absolute parallel between mantra meditation and acoustic resonance, because in acoustic resonance, when you introduce the energy of sound to another object, that object actually picks up from the spectrum of sound that you send to it its own natural vibration, and it begins to vibrate. It wasn't vibrating a moment before, but when you introduce this energy to it, it starts to vibrate. And an example that's a demonstration that's often given is taking two tuning forks. And when you put them near each other in the room and you hit one with a rubber mallet, and in due course of time, the second tuning fork that hasn't been struck, isn't vibrating already, will begin to vibrate. And it picks up from the first one the energy of the second. So this is an example of what's called excitation. You're introducing some energy from one entity to another, and then the one that was at rest begins to vibrate at a higher level. So HES, or higher energy states, are attained through excitation, which means that you introduce some higher energy source, and because of that, you can reach a higher potential. And so in mantra meditation, introducing the mantra, which we did quite a bit of last week in various settings, people experience for themselves, they're introducing a vibration that's coming in, and it's lifting them up, essentially. This is something that's mentioned in the Bhakti text called Bhagavad Gita. It says, Mam chayo vyabhicharini bhakti-yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. In essence, this text is saying that when you introduce into your life a higher practice and a higher vibration, and part of the practice is surrounding yourself with more vibration, or at least introducing it into your consciousness on a regular basis, then you can rise above the lower energies in life. Mam chayo vyabhicharini bhaktis yogena sevate. So it has it in the verse itself that if you practice yoga, bhakti yoga, means the yoga of gratitude, which includes the repetition of mantra. Sevate means service. You're dedicated to service, which is a higher mode of consciousness. Sagunan samatityaitan. Atitya means to rise above something. How many times have you been in a situation where you wished you could have risen above a particular emotion or a desire or a habit? That's a real question, not rhetorical. Tell me, please, how many times? Approximately. Anyone? You can also use the text box here on your Zoom or on Facebook and write it in, any comments you have as I'm speaking. Sagunan samatityaitan means that by this steady practice of yoga, the yoga of gratitude and mantra, then you rise above naturally the gunas. The gunas are the modalities of the lower energies of the material world. The lowest of them is called tamas. It's darkness, and it's also inertia, sleep. Above that is passion, which means industriousness and unlimited desires. One follows another. And sattva is the topmost mode of material nature, which means clarity, satisfaction, knowledge, light, illumination, and so forth. But even above these is the position of Shuddha Sattva, which means beyond these three modalities. Even Sattva in the material realm can become contaminated by the lower modes. But Shuddha Sattva is a purely spiritual state, which can be attained through the practice of bhakti. So sagunan samatityaitan, one rises above the modes, Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. One becomes qualified to be in Brahman, which means to be in spiritual consciousness. And this doesn't mean that one has to retire to a forest or anything like that. You can live in Silicon Valley and rise above the modes of material nature by the practice itself. So this is a kind of intervention, HES, or higher energy states. It means to introduce something new into your life, into your consciousness, that will help you to resonate at a higher level. Yes, I hear somebody chirping. Please chirp in.
So we do have Vladimir who has joined in as well.
Oh, Vladimir, thank you for joining. Nice to have you here. If you have a comment or a question, which is really what this forum is meant for, if you have questions, I know it may be difficult to form them sometimes, but if you practice at it by asking, you'll find that it gets easier. You can unmute yourself and ask away.
So this is Justina. So to your question, definitely can relate with sometimes like having the low, noticing like I respond in a way that's not a high vibration. And I kind of get a little bit upset, like, man, I thought like I was better than this, but I guess it's just a reminder. So yeah, it would be great to maybe get some practical tips on how we can get to the higher vibration. But that's my first question, or to have that happen less often. And also a second question that I'm curious about is, you mentioned you don't need to retire. You can still live in a material world. I'd like to ask for your perspective on like wealth and spirituality. And like, do you feel that being wealthy or having a lot of material possessions can be, is okay? Can we use spirituality to actually get more? Or is it a contradiction? So those are kind of the two questions I have.
Excellent questions. They're very important and well placed at this time. So the first question about developing the wherewithal to rise above the lower impulses is very important, actually. In fact, in one of the very concise books on bhakti, written 500 years ago by the author and great master of bhakti-yoga called Rupa Goswami, he starts the entire book, which again is concise, but the first verse says, Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam. And it goes on, Jihva vegam udarapasta vegam. But what he's talking about here is being able to control the urges. Vega is called urge, or translated as urge. So the first urge is vacho, which means speech. And so much is revealed by the speech. Like there's an old saying, he had nothing to say and then he said it. Or, you know, a fool isn't revealed until he or she speaks. You know, can be dressed up, ready to go, but then the words come out and you go, oh my goodness. So how is that done? One way is, it is certain that by a regular personal home practice of bhakti, especially mantra, is very helpful. Counting your mantras, it's something we talked about yesterday at the session. If you count your mantras, it'll give you a steady practice. It means you do a certain amount every day. Then what you'll start to realize is that you're introducing a kind of energy that helps you to develop detachment. This is called vairagya. Vairagya means that you're able to make a little separation between you and your life situation. And that is the kind of supposition I started this whole talk on, that there's a difference between you and your life situation. There's your life, which is you. You are life. You are conscious life. But there's your life situation around you, and there's a difference between the two. As your life situation changes, you'll always be the same. And ultimately, you're never affected by the life situation. Even the life situation called death, which means that you're leaving your body, it ultimately doesn't affect you because the entity that you are doesn't change. So when you introduce this higher level of consciousness through mantra, and also hearing from high-minded persons who have been practicing and have written things down, that's very helpful also. It helps to develop this vairagya, which means that you have a little sense of detachment. And when these kinds of impulses come up where you're going to normally react to something with anger or disappointment or something, you'll notice a little bit of extra energy there, a higher energy state that's within you that allows you to overcome that urge to succumb to utter disappointment, which isn't not very productive, or to anger, which is often causes an inordinate reaction that could really waylay your progress in life, professionally, spiritually, everything. And so that home practice really helps with that. And there's a lot to be said about that. It's not just at home, but it's a complete kind of practice that you can do. And the second answer that I'm going to give to the second, or answering the second question, relates to the first as well. Wealth or anything else is entirely employable in a higher service. So let me just start with saying that there's 3 paths described in the ancient yogic texts. One is the path of renunciation. And you've probably heard of this. Some people conceive of spiritual life as giving everything up. It means that I don't touch money, I don't touch anything, I live in a cave, I drink, I dress very simply, I don't interact with the world, and so forth. This is very artificial, especially in this age. We're not trained for that kind of thing, nor is it to our liking ultimately. A very few people have a predilection towards, a predisposition rather, towards renunciation, because it's not, according to the bhakti yoga text, it's not our nature to be renounced. And then on the other side, you have the emolument of body and mind through getting as much material facility as possible. And that also unbelievably becomes boring after a certain amount of time. No matter how much wealth you get, it's not enough. There's more zeros you can add, and it's remarkable how money you can count to infinity. And if you get $1 trillion, it's still not enough. It doesn't satisfy. It doesn't satisfy the self. And so collection of material things, which is called bhoga, means try to enjoy the world, doesn't work. And the opposite side of the pendulum called tyaga, which means to give up everything, it doesn't work either. Because after you give everything up, then you'll think, well, maybe I'll go back and try it again. So there's a middle path. And this is the path most recommended, which is the path of dedication. Dedication means selfless service. Serve selflessly. That means use what you have for a higher purpose. And the highest kind of purpose is to serve. This is a point given in the Bhakti scriptures about service. It's a higher mindset. So if you use what you have, then you're excited to get more wealth. Because when you have wealth and you use it in service, you're thinking, how much can I, if you think, how much can I collect for myself, you'll be miserable. And it doesn't matter how much it is. If it's $10, you'll be unhappy. Or if it's $10 million, you'll be unhappy. If you're thinking, how can I get it for myself? But if you're thinking, how can I get it to use in service for a higher purpose, then you'll be excited about working for it. And this is called karma yoga. Karma yoga is very practical, especially for life here in Silicon Valley, that you utilize all the assets that you have for a higher purpose, and therefore they become transformed. Last point I'll just make on this, and that is, my teacher used to say this a lot, that if you take an iron rod and you place it in a hot fire and you leave it there, just like a blacksmith fire, then the iron transforms. It's no longer iron, it becomes fire. So in the same way, all our assets, whatever we collect that is so-called material, if you use it for a higher cause, then it transforms it from being a material thing into something that is spiritualized. And then it doesn't cause you problems, doesn't drag you down, and you'll be endlessly interested, and you can go on doing what you do to get more assets to use for a higher cause. Justina, did that help?
That does. So does that mean instead of buying a big house, you should buy a small house and spend the rest of the money giving to others?
Well, let's look at that one. What if, let's say you had at your big house, you held programs that help to enlighten people. I know people who do this. In fact, I know someone who just bought a big house. That's like their pension is buying big houses. They're in real estate, and apparently, from what I can tell, they can afford these things. And the reason they bought their last house is so they can have bigger programs, because they have programs in their house where they invite speakers over, and they have spiritual programs, and they want to have an environment where people can come and feel safe, and they use their house for that purpose. So following the same principle, whether it's money, house, anything, it can be used for a higher cause, and therefore it becomes transformed.
Got it. I think that's a great answer. Thanks so much.
Okay, sure. Thanks for asking.
And we do have Raghunatha Prabhu, who has also joined.
Harekrishna.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. If you have reflections, those are good too. Anything that you heard that you can reflect back. And of course,
I have a follow-up question.
Yes, please, Vladimir.
Hello, Vaisesika. Thank you for answering the previous question. That was very interesting. Could you please tell us a little bit more on serving higher purpose? What are the main attributes of higher purpose? Thank you.
You're welcome. One of the great teachers of Bhakti, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, about 200 years ago, he isolated various levels of motivation in a hierarchy. So he said that the lowest of motivation is prospect. Means, what do I get in return for this? For my work, for my service. I want something back. And then he said, above that, you get, actually lower than that. There's one lower. The first one is fear. I'm doing it out of fear. And then above that is prospect. What do I get? So the fear is like, if I don't do this, this is what's going to happen. So I'm forced to do it. And then above that is prospect. What am I going to get? I'm working for myself. And then above that, the next motivation is duty. I'm working because of duty. And dutiful work is actually in the mode of goodness. It's a sattva. Of the three modes I mentioned, it's the highest mode. But above doing it out of duty is doing out of love. So when you're actually doing it out of love, it's an all-encompassing kind of feeling, and there's so much that comes from that. And that is the highest motivation. So to be more precise, there are different ways of serving. If one is aware of, for instance, the predicament that people are in this world, in the Bhakti text Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Atma upamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna. Sukham va yadiva dukam sayogi paramo mataha. He says the highest yogi, the parama yogi, is the one who has compassion for other people, because he sees he can relate to their predicament, as we're all in the same boat, basically. And he feels, or she feels, that I have, an asset that I can share with people to help them become better situated, especially knowledge. I was just reading in this Bhakti text earlier, like the importance of knowledge, of giving actual knowledge so that one can rise above the complexities of the world. And this is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita that says, as a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. So if one serves by helping to give knowledge to other people so that they can not exploit the material world in a better way and become more entangled, but actually help themselves through becoming more enlightened and better at their life and happier. This is a very high kind of service. And connecting people to that knowledge, which helps connect them to their own original divine source, is a kind of practice that is mentioned in all the Bhakti texts as being very, very satisfying to the heart, and it helps one to connect on the highest level, highest motivation. Does that help, Vladimir? Do you have a follow-up?
That helps a lot. Thank you very much. Very practical.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question. You used their higher, connect people to their higher, sorry.
I think I said original divine source.
Original divine source. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, also, one more follow-up question from the previous answer. The book that you mentioned that was written 500 years ago, and you said it's kind of condensed. Is it good for beginner readers, so to say? And would you tell us?
Some of it is good for beginner readers. It because it's a concise writing. It starts off in kind of a simple way, and then it goes up really, really fast. But it's worth having a look at. It's called the Nectar of Instruction, and it's written by Rupa Goswami. And I have a few copies. If next time we meet, I can make one available to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm completely open to any reflections or questions that you may have.
Okay, then if nobody else have questions, I can ask one more. Could you tell us, please, the reality, how we perceive it, like ordinary people perceive it? Is that an illusion? Is it considered an illusion?
Well, there are. Here's the way that the Bhakti literatures describe our perception of the material world, and that is that, or what the substance of the material world is. It's not that it's false. There are some schools of thought that say actually everything around you is false. It doesn't really exist. And that when you come to enlightenment, you'll understand that there is nothing and you are nothing. According to the Bhakti teachings, this is untenable because there is no such thing as nothing. There's a variety everywhere. The description in the Bhakti text about the material energy, which is described as bhinna, or separated energy, it's separated from its original source by lower consciousness, which is a little bit esoteric. But the fact is that the real designation of the material energy is that it is temporary, whereas you are not temporary. As I opened the monologue, we are higher energy. What we are called Atma is a spiritual energy that there's no enervation. It doesn't lose over time. It doesn't diminish, it doesn't change, it's steady. Whereas the material energy is constantly changing. In that sense, it's an inferior nature. So the material energy itself is illusory in the sense that I perceive it, or I try to connect myself with it, and I embed myself in it and think that that this is me. For instance, I'm in a body right now. And if I say, actually, this is me, that's called illusory because I've misplaced the category of energy. It's not actually me. It's something I'm residing within for now. So that when we don't see the connection of the energy to its proper category and what it actually is, this is called illusion. But the energy itself is real. It's just that it's a different category of energy and it's very temporary. Was that understandable, Vladimir?
Yeah, that was understandable. Thank you. Interesting. Thank you.
Welcome. Justine, I saw earlier you might have come off mute just for a second. I just want to check and see if you had another thought.
Well, I always have lots of thoughts. I have lots of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to take the meeting over from everyone else, but
it's okay. It's just everyone feel free to just express yourself and let it balance out naturally. I think.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, Justin.
Not at all, not at all. You go ahead, and then we'll come right back to Justina when she's pushing.
No problem. Everyone ask their questions. I've had a lot of opportunity. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about mantra meditation recently, but I just want to dwell like in happiness while doing mantra meditation. But oftentimes what happens is I end up counting the beats or I'm not able to focus. I know the mantra, so I my lips speak aloud, but that doesn't mean that I'm doing it sincerely. That's what I feel.
Well, the very fact that you're aware that you're not doing it nicely is a kind of awareness that's helpful. You know, Rakesh, as you know, in every discipline, there's a period of time in which there is a little bit of arduous labor in order to get the fruit. If I pick up a violin and I decide I'm going to play it, I'm going to be, the way I play it is going to be disappointing, not just to others, but to me for quite some time, until I'm able to strike a note that sounds really clear and nice. And same in the practice of mantra meditation. Your complaint that the mind doesn't cooperate is the most common complaint, but that's the point. When you're training a horse, it doesn't immediately comply. You can't go up to a wild horse and say, excuse me, please come here, and the horse will come over. It'll take some maneuvering to do that. And that's why I recommended a steady practice, which means consistent, which means that you count your mantras and you do it every day, I guarantee you that you'll have breakthrough. That is a fact, especially if you're steady and you keep it up over some time and keep practicing. The other point is, it's a simple bit of advice given to me by one of my colleagues who likes to simplify things, especially for meditation. And that is, when you're chanting your mantra, be aware that you're chanting. I know that sounds simple, but the fact is it's so easy to do it and then think of other things. And I'll just give you an example to close this with, which is, if you go to, for instance, you decide that you're going to go to a gym to get in good physical shape. So you sign up and then you go to the gym and you start lifting weights. After 3 days, you think, well, I like with lifting weight. I don't like lifting weights so much, but I do think it's a good idea to go to the gym. So you go to the gym and then you go in there and you don't actually lift the weights. You just move your arms up and down. And in the same way, when you're doing mantra, you may decide, yeah, I should do my mantra because it's good for me, but then you may not concentrate. And concentration is the heavy lifting. So that's really where, and excuse the cliche, where the rubber meets the road, the concentration. And even if you can do it for 10 seconds, actually sincere concentration, you'll get so much benefit for one day, for 10 seconds. The rest of it, your mind might be all over the place, but keep pulling back to the center and keep practicing and you will have success.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome, Ricky.
So we do, sorry.
Yes, yes, please.
We have two questions, one on Zoom and other one on Facebook.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So on the Zoom is from Stephen and is asking, is there a way to evaluate our current energy levels?
Yes, there is. One is to be self-examining, and the Bhakti literatures talk about, one of the ways, and it's a very natural way, this is a text from one of the ancient Bhakti literatures called Srimad Bhagavatam that says, Bhakti parisharubhava viraktir anyata traisha trika ekakala prapadya manasya yatashna tasus tushti pushti shudapayonugasan. And all that means is, it's giving a comparison to your spiritual practice and eating. So that makes it easy, right? So when you eat, it says, naturally, when you're hungry and you eat, you get nourishment, satisfaction, and your hunger goes away. Those are the three things that it lists. So it said in the same way, when you're connecting spiritually to your practice, what you're going to get is a direct connection to your source. You're also going to start to see things in connection to the higher level of vision, like in connection to your source. And then third thing is, you'll feel a modicum of detachment from all things that are not related to higher energy. It's natural. I mentioned it earlier, vairagya. So that's compared to eating. When you eat, you get full. And if somebody brings you more and says, here, eat more, he's like, no, thanks, I'm not hungry. So when you're full spiritually, you also are not so inclined to pick up bad habits and things like that. And that's actually a miracle, because it's so easy to pick up bad habits or be attracted to lower energy. But when you have a higher energy source coming into your life, you'll notice it for yourself that, hey, I'm actually full, I don't need this. Or like Justina said earlier, in that discussion about how to overcome the lower impulses, like, how did I just do that? You'll actually be amazed, and you'll realize it's coming in from a higher source. So that's one of the ways that you'll see for yourself that you're actually advancing. JP, go ahead with the other one so we can get under the wire here.
Yeah, so the second is from Trevor. He's asking, could you please say something about using the challenges that life throws at you to become more spiritually fit?
Oh, yeah. Hey, good one. Actually, we do a little seminar on it called Frustration, the Door to Enlightenment. Because if we were completely compatible with matter, which is a lower energy, we wouldn't be frustrated. There is no such thing as frustrated. There would be a complete homogeneous connection. But the fact is that because I have a lot higher expectations than I get from matter every single time, and it doesn't matter what you get, what you expect in your mind And what you actually get are, there's always a dichotomy. It's always not as good as you thought, or even if it was as good as you thought or better, it's going to diminish over time and you're going to get frustrated by it. So one thing to take from that is to understand the very basic premise of this presentation today, and that is you're not your body. You're a higher energy and you're interacting with the lower energy, and that's why you get frustrated. And so when you get that kind of frustration, it's important to know where to go to actually find real satisfaction. You know, it's not so much that you're perfect all the time, but you know where to go to take shelter from the storm. And that's in your spiritual practice. And the frustration will push you back there, because if you get tempted to start, you know, developing bad habits again, and you get frustrated, that's like the warning light on your car going like, wrong. No, you don't. Go back. Yeah, be good. Actually, be your higher self. Don't let the dictates of the lower senses take over. Do we have time to fit in Justina's, or are we over time?
We can fit in Justina.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm excited about this question. So do we have the power to create like a vision and reality? There's a lot of talk about vision boards, especially like on my team at work, and, you know, about, you know, our leader creates vision boards and she says most of the time they come true. So what are your thoughts on our power to create? And is that even something we should like ally for vision for ourselves? And is that even something we should focus on? Because that seems to be like controlling or manipulating our future. Should it just come naturally? Yeah, just would love to hear your thoughts on that. Sure,
great question. We are creative. Our consciousness is creative. In fact, even our words are creative. And it is it's our nature that we create, because life creates other things. You know, the world we see around us is created by consciousness. And so it is not manipulative necessarily unless you have a manipulative motive. Motive is everything. So if you're creating and you have a motive of service, create more, because you're creating a better world around you, and you're doing it for a higher purpose. So it's aligned in a way that is very, very beneficial. And the very definition of consciousness is that it's creative. And so that we do create, and it's obvious, because, you know, you just gave anecdotal evidence there. When you create a vision board, then it seems to all come true. Otherwise, you know, why do we bother to set goals? Once you set a goal, you have a vision. You know, every project, every strategic planning starts with vision, mission. As what do you want? And Stephen Covey used to say, start with the end in mind. What are you shooting for? You can create it. However, we're not the sole creators. There are a lot of factors that are that are assisting us. This is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, that there are 5 factors that you have to consider that complete any action. And so we're one of the factors. Our desire is there, but there are other forces in the world that help us to complete that. And when they're all in alignment, then, you know, we may get exactly what we were shooting for. Otherwise, there are going to be ways in which that it's waylaid. But absolutely, we are creators. Consciousness is creative, and creating in and of itself is not manipulative. It depends on the motive. But you're not going to stop creating. In any mode of nature, you're going to keep creating, because that's what life does. Life creates, and that's the miracle of it. So you can live in the miracle, but purify the miracle, so you're doing it for a higher cause, higher motive, and then it becomes unlimitedly beneficial to you and to everybody else. Thank you.
It sounds like we're creating by default. It's just our creation will show kind of what our makeup is.
Yeah, well, when you create by default, a lot of times people create a mess, you know. You're creating, but if it's in a lower mode of nature, then you really do, you know, create an environment that is not very nice. like a garden. You know, you create a garden and you think about it ahead of time, and there's many factors that you have to depend on when you create the garden. It's not you alone. There has to be sun and water and air and things like that. So you're a co-creator, and if you think about it ahead of time and you do it, but what you said is nice. You know, by default we're going to create because that's what we do. So better to focus it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go and think about what I want to create and be thoughtful.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Great to see you again. Thanks everyone for joining in today. It's a really nice session and great questions. Thanks Pete for moderating and getting us up online and everything. And I'll be looking forward to see you. Okay, bye, Stephen. Thank you very much. Great to see you. Looking forward to seeing you at the next event or online. And remember that where attention goes, energy flows. And always keep the higher vibration going in your life. Those two things are guidelines that help in any spiritual practice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.